You wake up in the middle of the night, your heart pounding faster than usual. Your hands are sweaty, your breathing's shaky, and there's this weird feeling in the air, like someone just left your room. You look around in the dark, trying to find a logical explanation, but there's nothing. Then, like a flash, the memory comes back. You were dreaming about someone who's already passed away. Maybe it was your grandma, whispering loving words you can't quite remember anymore. Or your dad, standing at the end of the hallway in your childhood home, waving with that smile you missed so much. It could have been a dear friend who left too soon, their eyes shining with a light that seemed different, more intense, more real. And now you're here, wide awake, with a question banging in your mind. Was that just a dream, or was it something more? Your rational mind tries to convince you it was just your imagination processing the grief, but there's something inside you, a deep intuition, an inexplicable certainty, that whispers, that was real, they were here. You're not the first person to feel confused after an experience like this. In fact, you're far from alone. You know what the most unsettling feeling of all is? It's not the fear of the unknown. It's that contradictory mix of relief and melancholy that washes over you. Relief because, for a few precious moments, you got to be with that person again. Melancholy because, when you woke up, the reality of the loss hit you like a cold wave. But what if I told you that this experience you had wasn't a product of your imagination? What if there was a much deeper, more significant explanation for these nighttime encounters? What if these dreams were actually real visits from souls who crossed the veil between worlds? If you've had an experience like this, hit the like button on this video right now. You'll find out you're not alone on this journey. And if you want to fully understand what really happens when we dream about deceased people, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what you're about to discover today will forever change how you see these mysterious encounters. Also, leave a comment telling me, have you ever dreamt of someone who passed away? What was that experience like? You're not alone. Millions of people around the world, from all cultures, ages, and beliefs, have had the same experience as you. Studies show that over 60% of people have dreamt at least once about someone who passed away. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't a pathology. This is a fundamental part of the human experience. Think for a moment. If these dreams were just products of our minds processing grief, why would they be so universal? Why have completely isolated cultures throughout history developed similar beliefs about visits from the dead through dreams? The ancient Egyptians believed dreams were portals to the world of the dead. The ancient Greeks had special temples where people would go to sleep hoping to receive visits from deceased loved ones. Native American peoples have always known that the dream world is a sacred territory where the living and the dead meet. But maybe you're thinking, those are just old beliefs, superstitions from people who didn't have scientific knowledge. Well, let me introduce you to something interesting. Modern researchers at Cardiff University in Wales conducted a fascinating study with over 2,000 people who reported dreams about the deceased. What they discovered was surprising. These dreams didn't follow the typical patterns of common dreams. They were more vivid, more coherent, and left lasting impressions that persisted for years. Dr. Nigel Field, a psychology professor at Cardiff University, stated, "These dreams have unique qualities that distinguish them from normal dreams. There's an emotional clarity and a sense of real presence that we simply don't find in other types of dreams." Have you ever noticed that when you dream about a deceased person, you can usually remember the dream in impressive detail, even after weeks or months? This happens because these dream encounters leave a different energetic mark on your consciousness. They don't dissolve into the mist of forgetfulness like most of our dreams. They remain crystalline, like eternal photographs stored in the deepest archive of your soul. And there's another fascinating aspect. In these dreams, the deceased person usually appears at peace, radiant, free from any suffering they might have experienced before death. They rarely appear as they were in the final moments of their physical life. Instead, they show themselves in their purest, most essential form. Your grandmother might appear young and vibrant, without the signs of the illness that took her. Your father might be radiating an energy of completeness he never showed in life. This isn't your subconscious creating an idealized version of these people. This is you perceiving these souls in their true state, free from the limitations of the physical body. It's you seeing them as they truly are now, beings of pure light, unconditional love, and infinite wisdom. But why does this happen? Why do some people have these encounters while others don't? The answer has to do with spiritual receptivity and emotional connection. When we sleep, the barriers our conscious mind creates during the day dissolve. Our brain enters altered states of consciousness, especially during REM sleep, which is when most of these encounters occur. During REM sleep, our brain activity closely resembles brain activity during deep meditative states. Our brainwaves change, our perception expands, and we naturally become more receptive to subtle dimensions of reality. It's as if, during these precious hours of the night, a window opens between the worlds. Now you might be wondering, but who really understands these things? Is there someone who has studied these phenomena seriously and deeply? The answer is yes, and that person's name is Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce wasn't just an ordinary man. He was possibly the most documented and studied psychic in modern history. Born in 1877 in Kentucky, Cayce conducted over 14,000 psychic readings throughout his life, all meticulously recorded and archived. He became known as the sleeping prophet because he would enter a deep trance state to access information his conscious mind couldn't know. But here's what makes Edgar Cayce truly extraordinary. His readings weren't vague or generic. They were specific, detailed, and in many cases, verifiable. Doctors from all over the world would send complex cases to Cayce, and he would diagnose illnesses and prescribe treatments with a precision that perplexed the medical community. He spoke about anatomy and physiology with encyclopedic knowledge, despite never having formally studied medicine. Universities like Yale, Harvard, and Johns Hopkins sent researchers to study Cayce's work. The result? They couldn't explain how he did what he did, but they couldn't deny the effectiveness of his information. Dr. Wesley Ketchum, a Harvard-trained physician, worked with Cayce for years and publicly declared, "The information provided by Edgar Cayce is more accurate than any medical diagnosis I have ever seen." But what made Edgar Cayce an authority on communicating with the dead? During his trance sessions, he frequently came into contact with souls who had departed the physical world. These entities communicated detailed information about their earthly lives, about their still living loved ones, and about the nature of existence after death. Cayce compiled an immense archive of information about the spiritual world, based on thousands of direct communications with disembodied souls. One of Cayce's most important discoveries was that consciousness isn't limited to the physical brain. He described consciousness as a force that exists independently of the body, capable of operating in multiple dimensions simultaneously. According to Cayce, when we sleep, our consciousness naturally expands beyond physical limits, making communication with spiritual dimensions possible. "The mind is the builder," Cayce said. "The physical body is merely the result." He explained that our true nature is spiritual, and that the material body is temporary, like clothes we wear during our stay on Earth. When someone dies, only the clothes are discarded. Consciousness, the real soul, continues to exist on a different vibrational frequency. Cayce revealed that there are multiple levels of spiritual existence, like floors in a cosmic building. When someone dies, they don't just disappear. They move to one of these levels, depending on their spiritual development and the lessons they still need to learn. And here's the fascinating part. Souls on these levels near Earth can, under certain circumstances, communicate with the living through dreams. But Edgar Cayce went beyond simply confirming that this communication is possible. He mapped out the specific conditions that make these encounters more likely. He identified the types of messages disembodied souls most frequently try to transmit, and he developed practical techniques to increase our receptivity to these sacred communications. Cayce's work didn't stop with his death in 1945. The Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE, founded to preserve and study his work, continues to be active today, with modern researchers validating many of his claims using technology that didn't exist in his time. Recent studies using electroencephalography have shown that experienced mediums exhibit unique brainwave patterns during spiritual communications, patterns that align perfectly with Cayce's descriptions of expanded states of consciousness. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. How exactly do these communications work? Edgar Cayce explained that there's a specific mechanism that allows souls to communicate with us through dreams, and understanding this mechanism is crucial for recognizing when a true spiritual communication is happening. First, we need to understand what Cayce called the etheric body or spiritual body. According to his teachings, each of us has multiple bodies: the physical body we see in the mirror, the emotional body that feels our emotions, the mental body that processes our thoughts, and the spiritual body which is our true eternal essence. When someone dies, only the physical body is discarded. The other bodies, especially the spiritual body, continue to exist on a higher vibrational frequency. It's like changing from an AM radio station to FM. The information is still there, just vibrating at a different frequency. During sleep, especially during deep REM phases, our consciousness naturally rises to higher vibrational frequencies. It's as if we have an internal dial that, when we completely relax, automatically tunes into higher spiritual stations. In this expanded state of consciousness, we can perceive presences and information that are invisible to our waking mind, focused on the physical world. But here's the crucial aspect Cayce revealed. Disembodied souls need to lower their vibration at the same time we raise ours. It's a meeting halfway, vibrationally. They make a considerable effort to condense their refined spiritual energy into a form we can perceive, while we, unconsciously, expand our perception to reach more subtle dimensions. This process requires a significant amount of spiritual energy on the part of the disembodied soul. That's why these encounters don't happen every night. That's why they tend to occur at specific times: birthdays, important dates, periods of emotional crisis, or when there's an urgent message that needs to be conveyed. Cayce explained that there are specific windows when this communication becomes easier. One of these windows occurs in the first few weeks after death, when the soul still maintains a strong vibrational connection to the earthly plane. Another window opens during periods of intense longing or emotional need on the part of the living. Love is, literally, a magnetic force that can draw souls back for temporary communications. There's also a fascinating aspect related to the energetic fields of places. Cayce discovered that certain environments, especially places where the deceased person spent a lot of time or had emotionally intense experiences, retain energetic prints that facilitate communication. That's why many people report more vivid dreams with deceased loved ones when they sleep at their family home or in significant places. But the most important mechanism of all is what Cayce called heart attunement. When our love for someone is genuine and deep, we create what he described as a permanent energetic channel between our souls. This channel isn't broken by death. In fact, it can become even clearer when the distractions of the physical world are removed. During sleep, when our analytical mind is quiet, this channel naturally opens. It's as if we have a direct phone line to certain souls, and the ring can only be heard when we're in a state of total receptivity. The souls who loved us most in life are the ones who have the easiest access to this channel, and they are the ones who appear most frequently in our dreams. Edgar Cayce also revealed that our ability to receive these communications can be developed. He taught specific meditation and prayer techniques that increase our spiritual sensitivity. People who regularly practice these techniques report more frequent and clearer dreams with deceased loved ones. The most beautiful aspect of this entire process is that it's always based on love. Cayce emphasized that only souls moved by true love have the ability to make this journey back to communicate with us. Spirits with negative intentions or who are stuck in low frequencies simply cannot reach the elevated dimensions where these communications occur. This means that when you have a truly spiritual dream with someone who passed away, you can be absolutely certain that you're receiving a visit from a soul who loves you deeply and wants what's best for you. It's a sacred gift, a blessing that transcends the limitations of the physical world. Based on decades of research and thousands of spiritual communications, Edgar Cayce identified three main reasons why souls return to communicate with us through dreams. Understanding these three categories will completely transform how you interpret your dream experiences with deceased people. The first reason is unconditional love and reconnection. This is by far the most common motivation for these spiritual visits. When someone who loved us deeply crosses to the other side, that love doesn't diminish, it intensifies. Freed from the limitations and distractions of the physical world, this love becomes purer, more powerful, more focused. Imagine for a moment, when you were alive in the physical world, how many times did you want to express your love for someone, but were prevented by circumstances? Maybe you were in a hurry, or distracted, or simply assumed the person already knew. Maybe you were dealing with your own insecurities or fears. But when the soul frees itself from the physical body, all those barriers disappear. Cayce explained that souls who return out of love usually appear radiant, peaceful, enveloped in a soft, welcoming light. They don't come to scare or disturb, but to embrace, to comfort, to say the words they perhaps didn't have the opportunity to say in life. These visits are like love letters written in spiritual language, delivered through the mail of dreams. You can recognize these encounters because they leave a feeling of profound peace, even if you wake up with tears in your eyes. There's a quality of completeness, as if a circle has been closed. The central message is always the same: I'm okay, I still love you, and our bond is eternal. The second reason is unfinished business and resolution. Not all souls manage to depart in peace. Some remain concerned about situations they left unresolved in the physical world. Maybe harsh words were spoken and never taken back. Maybe there was an important project left incomplete. Or maybe the person died carrying guilt or regret about something they did or didn't do. These souls return with a different urgency. They come to seek forgiveness, offer forgiveness, or transmit important information that can help resolve pending issues. Cayce observed that these communications tend to be more direct and specific. The soul might appear in the dream, pointing to a specific location where something important is hidden, or might speak clear words of reconciliation, or might provide practical guidance on how to deal with a complex situation. A fascinating case documented by Cayce involved a woman who repeatedly dreamt of her deceased husband. In the dream, he would lead her to the attic of their house and point to a specific floorboard. Initially, she ignored the dream, thinking it was just her imagination. But the dream repeated for several nights, always with the same detail: the loose board in the northeast corner of the attic. Finally, she decided to check. When she lifted the board, she found an important insurance policy that neither she nor the lawyers knew existed. Her husband, in spirit, was making sure she didn't face financial difficulties. He had unfinished business and returned to complete it. These dreams of resolution can be emotionally intense, but they are deeply healing. They offer an opportunity for old wounds to be healed, for misunderstandings to be clarified, and for the soul to finally find the peace it needs to continue its spiritual journey. The third reason is warnings and protection. This is perhaps the most dramatic and urgent category. Some souls return because they can perceive dangers or opportunities that aren't yet visible to us in the physical world. From the spiritual plane, they have a broader perspective, like someone on a mountaintop can see obstacles on the road that are invisible to someone driving in the valley. Cayce documented hundreds of cases where deceased people appeared in dreams to warn about impending accidents, health problems that needed immediate attention, or even to guide important life decisions. These souls act as spiritual guardians, using their advantageous position on the spiritual plane to protect those they love. These warning dreams have distinct characteristics. They are generally more vivid and urgent than common dreams. The deceased person might appear more serious, more focused. There might be repetitive symbols, vibrant colors, or a sense of urgency that persists even after waking up. The message might be literal, "Don't go to work tomorrow," or symbolic, requiring careful interpretation. A powerful example comes from Cayce's archives. A young woman dreamt 3 consecutive nights of her deceased grandfather. In each dream, he held an injured white bird and said, "Take care of the bird. It needs help." On the third day, she discovered that her young daughter had developed a severe respiratory infection that doctors hadn't detected yet. The bird symbolized the child's lungs, and the grandfather was warning of a health problem that required immediate attention. But here's something fascinating. Cayce discovered that these three types of communication can overlap. A soul might return out of love, but also take the opportunity to resolve pending issues or offer protection. It's as if, once the communication channel opens, multiple messages can be transmitted simultaneously. The key to distinguishing between these different categories lies in careful observation of the dream's details. Dreams of pure love are usually soft, warm, enveloped in golden or white light. Dreams of resolution tend to be more specific, with clear practical or symbolic elements. Warning dreams are urgent, sometimes repetitive, with an alerting quality that's impossible to ignore. Now, let me share with you some of the most extraordinary and touching stories Edgar Cayce documented throughout his career. These aren't just fascinating accounts. They're concrete evidence that communication between worlds not only exists, but can have profound and transformative impacts on people's lives. The first story I want to tell is about a 42-year-old woman named Sarah who lost her husband David in a car accident. They had been married for 18 years and had 2 teenage children. Sarah was devastated, not only by the loss, but because the last words they exchanged before he left for work that fatal day were during an argument about finances. She couldn't forgive herself for not saying, "I love you," when he walked out the door. 3 months after the funeral, Sarah started having a recurring dream. She was in their kitchen, and David would walk in through the back door as he always did when he came home from work. But this time he was radiant, enveloped in a soft golden light. He would approach her, take her hands, and say, "Sarah, our last conversation wasn't about money. It was about love. Even when we were arguing, it was because we cared about each other, because we wanted the best for our family. You don't need to carry that guilt. I know you love me, and you know I love you. That never changed." In the dream, David would hug her, and she could physically feel the warmth of his embrace, the familiar scent of his cologne, even the rough fabric of his work shirt. When she woke up, Sarah felt a profound peace that lasted all day. This dream repeated for several nights, always with the same message of forgiveness and unconditional love. But here's the most impressive part. During one of these dreams, David mentioned a surprise he had hidden for their 20th wedding anniversary, which would be in 6 months. He said it was in a blue box in the attic, behind the Christmas decorations. Sarah woke up intrigued, because she didn't remember any blue box in the attic. When she checked, she found exactly what David had described, a small blue velvet box containing a pearl necklace with a note, "To my Sarah, who makes my life shine like these pearls. With eternal love, David." The note was dated 2 weeks before the accident. This discovery completely transformed Sarah's perspective on death. She realized that David not only continued to exist, but was actively looking out for her, making sure she received the gift he had prepared with such care. The dream ceased after this discovery, as if David had fulfilled his mission. The second story is about a man named Robert, an executive at a large company, who had always been skeptical of anything spiritual. He prided himself on his rational, scientific approach to life. But everything changed when he started dreaming about his mother, who had died of cancer 6 months earlier. In the dreams, Robert's mother appeared young and healthy, as he remembered her from his childhood. She was always in a beautiful garden, full of flowers he had never seen before. But what impressed him most was that in the dreams, she knew things about his current life that she couldn't possibly know if she were just in his imagination. In one particularly vivid dream, his mother said, "Robert, you're working too much again. Remember when I used to say money can't buy time? You're missing the most important moments with Julia and the kids. There's an opportunity coming for you to change that, but you need to be open to seeing it." The week after the dream, Robert received an unexpected offer from an old colleague to become a partner in a smaller company, with more flexibility and time for family. Normally, he would have rejected it immediately. The initial salary was lower, and there were more risks involved. But his mother's words echoed in his mind. He decided to accept the offer, and 2 years later, he was not only financially better off than in his previous job, but also present for all his children's important events. He frequently credited this life-changing decision to the guidance he received from his mother in his dreams. The third story is about a young woman named Maria, 19, who lost her best friend Carlos in a motorcycle accident. They had been inseparable since childhood, and Maria was planning to confess her romantic feelings for Carlos the week after the accident. Maria was devastated not only by the loss, but also by the regret of never having told Carlos how she felt. She started having dreams where they were together in places from their childhood, the park where they played, the school where they met, the diner where they spent afternoons. But there was something different about these dreams. Carlos seemed more mature, wiser, enveloped in a pulsing silver light. In one of the most striking dreams, they were sitting on a swing in the park, and Carlos said, "Maria, I always knew how you felt, and I felt the same way. But our love doesn't need physical form to exist. It's eternal, and you'll carry it forever. But now you need to live. You need to love again. You need to be happy. That's what I want most for you." This dream helped Maria process her grief in a way that years of therapy couldn't. She understood that true love doesn't end with death, but transforms into a force that drives us to live more fully. Each of these stories illustrates different aspects of spiritual communication through dreams. They show how souls return to heal emotional wounds, provide practical guidance, and help the living find peace and direction. More importantly, they demonstrate that these encounters aren't fantasies or psychological projections, but real communications with tangible consequences in the physical world. Now we come to one of the most important parts of our journey: how to distinguish between a true spiritual encounter and a psychological projection or a common dream. Edgar Cayce developed specific criteria for making this distinction, and mastering these criteria is essential for anyone who genuinely wants to understand their dream experiences. The first criterion is the quality of presence. In a true spiritual encounter, the deceased person doesn't appear as a memory or fantasy. They present as an autonomous presence, with their own personality, energy, and intentions. You're not remembering how this person was, you're interacting with who they are now. Cayce explained that, in common dreams, our subconscious recreates people based on our memories and expectations. But in authentic spiritual communications, the soul presents itself in a way that can even surprise the dreamer. The person might demonstrate wisdom they didn't have in life, peace they didn't possess before death, or knowledge about events that occurred after their passing. A practical test Cayce suggested was to pay attention if the deceased person tells you something you didn't expect to hear, or if they demonstrate a perspective that goes beyond what your memories of them would include. If your grandmother, who in life was worried and anxious, appears in the dream radiating profound peace and serene wisdom, that's a strong indicator of a genuine encounter. The second criterion is informational coherence. Authentic spiritual dreams contain information that is logically consistent and often verifiable. The deceased person might provide specific details about object locations, future events, or situations you didn't know existed. Cayce documented hundreds of cases where people received factually correct information through dreams with the deceased. Unlike common dreams, which are often fragmented and illogical, these spiritual communications maintain a clear and coherent narrative. The deceased person doesn't change dramatically in appearance during the dream, doesn't behave contradictorily, and the message remains consistent. The third criterion is lasting emotional impact. Genuine spiritual dreams leave an emotional impression that persists for days, weeks, or even years. It's not just that you remember the dream, it's that the dream continues to influence your emotions, decisions, and life perspectives. Cayce observed that people who had authentic spiritual encounters frequently reported lasting positive changes in their lives. They might develop greater inner peace, a broader perspective on life and death, or a renewed sense of purpose and direction. These dreams aren't just fleeting experiences, they are catalysts for real transformation. The fourth criterion is the absence of fear or negativity. Although these dreams can be emotionally intense, they never carry a truly negative or threatening energy. Cayce emphasized that evolved souls who make the effort to return for communication do so out of love, not malice. If you have a dream where a deceased person appears in a frightening, hostile way or tries to harm you, that's likely not an authentic spiritual communication. It's more probable that it's a projection of your own fears, guilt, or unresolved traumas. Genuine spiritual communications can be serious or urgent, but always carry a fundamentally loving and protective energy. The fifth criterion is sensory clarity. In authentic spiritual encounters, sensory details are extraordinarily clear and specific. You might see the texture of the person's skin, hear the exact tone of their voice, smell the familiar scent of their perfume, or even experience physical sensations like the warmth of a hug. Cayce explained that this happens because during these communications, our spiritual perception expands beyond normal limits. We're not just dreaming about the memory of a person, we're actually perceiving their energetic presence through our expanded spiritual senses. The sixth criterion is bidirectional communication. In common dreams, you're usually observing or remembering, but in authentic spiritual communications, there's a real interaction. You can ask questions and receive specific answers. You can express feelings and see genuine reactions. There's a natural flow of communication that goes beyond what your conscious mind could create alone. Cayce also identified some red flags that indicate a dream is likely not an authentic spiritual communication. The deceased person asks you to do something you know they would never ask in life. There are fantastic or impossible elements that don't relate to spiritual messages. The person appears exactly as they were at the time of death, especially if they were suffering. You wake up feeling drained, confused, or disturbed for no clear reason. The dream feels forced or artificial. To develop your discernment ability, Cayce recommended keeping a detailed dream journal, noting not only the content, but also emotions, physical sensations, and any information that can be verified later. Over time, you'll start to recognize the unique patterns of authentic spiritual communications. The key is to approach these experiences with an open, yet discerning mind. Not every dream about a deceased person is a spiritual communication, but when a genuine communication occurs, it carries an unmistakable quality of authenticity that touches your soul in a deep and lasting way. But here's the question that's probably burning in your mind right now. If these communications are so real and powerful, why doesn't everyone experience them? Why do some people seem to have a direct line to the spiritual world, while others never even receive a dream visit? Edgar Cayce revealed that there's a deep mystery behind these communications, a kind of spiritual code that determines when, how, and why these bridges between worlds form. And what you're about to discover will shake everything you thought you knew about the afterlife. The first piece of this puzzle relates to what Cayce called vibrational resonance. Imagine that each soul has a unique energetic signature, like a spiritual fingerprint. When two souls shared intense experiences of love, compassion, or deep emotional connection during physical life, their energetic signatures intertwine, creating what Cayce described as a cord of light. This cord isn't broken by death. In fact, it can become stronger because the emotional interferences of the physical world, jealousy, fears, insecurities, pride are removed. But here's the mystery. Not all love creates this cord. It has to be a love that transcends the ego, a love that genuinely desires the other's well-being above all else. Cayce discovered something fascinating. People who went through experiences of deep forgiveness with someone before that person's death are much more likely to receive spiritual communications. It's as if the act of forgiving or being forgiven creates a special vibrational frequency that keeps the channels of communication open. But there's another even more mysterious factor. Cayce observed that certain people are born with what he called thinner spiritual veils. These people, from childhood, are naturally more sensitive to non-physical dimensions. They might be the children who talk about invisible friends, who are in reality spiritual guides. They are the teenagers who have prophetic dreams. They are the adults who just know things without being able to explain how. This sensitivity isn't a rare gift granted only to a select few. Cayce insisted that all of us are born with this ability, but most people turn it off during childhood due to social and educational conditioning. Our society teaches us to trust only the five physical senses, to dismiss intuitions as imagination, and to see the spiritual world as superstition. But here's a shocking revelation that emerges from Cayce's archives. People who experience great trauma or loss often have their spiritual veils torn by the emotional intensity of the experience. It's as if extreme pain creates fissures in the barrier between worlds. This explains why many people have their first spiritual communication shortly after losing someone very dear. And there's something even more intriguing. Cayce documented cases where people who had never had spiritual experiences before began to receive dream visits after moving into certain houses or locations. He discovered that some places maintain energetic portals, points where the veil between dimensions is naturally thinner. These places can be ancient sacred sites, places where many people prayed or meditated, or even residences where highly spiritual people lived. It's as if the accumulated spiritual energy in these places creates more favorable conditions for interdimensional communications. But perhaps the most mysterious aspect of all is what Cayce called temporal windows. He observed that certain times of the year, especially around solstices and equinoxes, are periods when spiritual communications become more frequent and vivid. He also noted patterns related to lunar phases, with the new and full moons being particularly conducive to these experiences. There's also the mystery of collective calls. Cayce documented cases where multiple people, in different locations, dreamt of the same deceased person on the same night, as if the disembodied soul had enough energy to visit several people simultaneously, or as if there were special moments when their communication ability was dramatically amplified. Now that you understand the spiritual science behind these communications, it's time for the most important part: how you can deliberately open yourself to receive these sacred visits. Edgar Cayce not only mapped the spiritual territory, he provided a true practical manual for becoming more receptive to communications with deceased souls. The first fundamental technique is what Cayce called preparing the inner temple. Before sleeping, you should create a physical and mental environment that invites spiritual presence. Start by purifying your sleeping space. Remove electronics, keep the environment clean and quiet, and if possible, light a white candle or lavender incense before going to bed. But the most important preparation is mental and emotional. Cayce taught a specific technique. Before falling asleep, sit in silence for a few minutes and mentally invite the deceased person to visit you. Don't do this as a desperate plea, but as a loving, open invitation. Say something like, "If it is the divine will and for the highest good, I am open to receiving a communication from person's name. May this experience be enveloped in light and love." The second technique is to keep a spiritual dream journal. Keep a notebook and pen next to your bed. The moment you wake up from any dream involving a deceased person, immediately write down all the details you can remember. What was said, how the person appeared, where you were, what emotions you felt, and any symbolism that appeared. Cayce emphasized that we should record even dreams that seem insignificant or confusing. Sometimes, the full meaning of a spiritual communication only becomes clear when we see patterns across multiple experiences. Moreover, the act of keeping a journal itself signals to the spiritual world that you are serious about receiving and honoring these communications. The third technique is the transformed longing meditation. When you miss someone who has passed, instead of sinking into sadness, use that emotion as fuel for spiritual connection. Sit in a quiet place, close your eyes, and allow yourself to fully feel the love you have for that person. Don't focus on the loss, focus on the eternal nature of that love. Visualize a golden light emanating from your heart and extending through the dimensions to reach the soul of the deceased person. Send your feelings of love, gratitude, and any message you want to convey. Then simply remain in silent receptivity, open to receiving any impression, sensation, or message that may come. Cayce also recommended the practice of intercessory prayer. Before sleeping, pray not only to receive communication, but for the spiritual well-being of the deceased soul. Pray for them to find peace, light, and progress on their spiritual journey. This altruistic approach creates a vibrational frequency of pure love that is extremely attractive to evolved souls. An advanced technique involves the use of connection objects. Cayce discovered that items that belong to the deceased person, especially jewelry, photographs, or objects they frequently touched, retain an energetic imprint that can facilitate communication. Keep one of these objects nearby while you sleep, or hold it during meditations focused on spiritual connection. To increase your general spiritual sensitivity, Cayce recommended certain lifestyle practices. Reduce alcohol consumption and substances that dull perception. Practice occasional fasting to purify the body. Spend time in nature, especially near bodies of water or old trees. Practice daily gratitude and acts of compassionate service, as these activities raise your vibrational frequency. There are also specific timings that Cayce identified as more conducive to spiritual communication. The period between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. is particularly powerful, as it's when the veil between worlds is naturally thinnest. If you wake up spontaneously at that time, stay quiet and receptive. It might be a sign that a communication is trying to occur. Cayce also taught techniques for dream incubation. Before sleeping, formulate a specific question you'd like the deceased person to answer, or ask for guidance on a particular situation. Write the question on a piece of paper and place it under your pillow. Then, fall asleep with the clear intention of receiving an answer through dreams. And so we come to the end of this extraordinary journey of discovery. But in truth, this isn't an end, it's a beginning. An awakening to a new understanding of the eternal nature of consciousness and love. When you started watching this video, you might have come here simply looking for an explanation for a disturbing or confusing dream. But now you possess something much more valuable. You have the keys to understanding one of the most sacred forms of communication that exists in the universe. You've discovered that death isn't a wall, but a door. It's not the end of relationships, but a transformation of them. Think for a moment about how this understanding changes everything. Every person you love who will one day physically depart isn't truly lost forever. Every meaningful relationship you build during your life has the potential to transcend the limitations of time and space. Every moment of genuine love you share is weaving threads of light that extend through dimensions. This means that right now, while you are alive and breathing in this physical world, you are creating energetic bridges that will last for eternity. Every kind word you say, every act of compassion you perform, every moment of forgiveness you offer or accept is building the pathways through which love can flow even after physical death. Edgar Cayce taught us that we are much more than temporary bodies wandering aimlessly through a meaningless existence. We are eternal spiritual beings, connected to each other by invisible threads of light and love. And these threads cannot be cut by death, only transformed and purified. When you dream about someone who has passed, you're not just remembering. You're receiving a letter from another world, a visit from someone who has crossed oceans of light to touch your soul once more. You're experiencing one of the purest forms of love that exists in the universe, a love so strong it transcends the very laws of physics. This should change how you live each day. Knowing that your loving connections are eternal, you can invest in them without fear. Knowing that there's no real separation, you can forgive more easily. Knowing that consciousness continues, you can face both life and death with renewed courage. But there's a responsibility that comes with this knowledge. Now that you know you can connect with souls who have passed, you also know that one day others will be dreaming of you. One day, you will be the one who crosses dimensions to comfort someone you left behind. How do you want to be remembered? What kind of energy do you want to carry into the spiritual world? Live in a way that when it's your turn to visit someone in dreams, you will arrive radiant with light, carrying messages of love, forgiveness, and wisdom. Build relationships so deep and genuine that they create eternal bridges. Love in a way that transcends time and space. And remember, every person you've lost is still accessible to you. They haven't disappeared, they've simply changed their address. And now you know how to send a letter, how to make a call, how to schedule a visit in this new reality. Your dreams aren't just dreams, they are portals, they are encounters. They are sacred gifts wrapped in symbols and delivered across dimensions by souls who love you beyond any earthly love you can imagine. If this journey has touched your soul in the way I hope it has, I need you to do something for me right now. Leave a comment below, sharing your own experience with spiritual dreams. Tell us about that dream you've never forgotten, about that visit that changed your perspective, about that message that arrived exactly when you needed it most. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications, because we have much more to explore together on this spiritual journey. And if you know someone who is going through grief or who has had similar experiences, share this video. Sometimes the difference between despair and hope is simply knowing that we are not alone. The veil between worlds is thinner than you think. Love is stronger than death. And you, my dear viewer, are far more powerful and connected than you ever dared to dream.